everything changed. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes while my mother told her book club friends that my younger sister was the one God got right. I was 22. I'd driven 4 hours to be there for her birthday weekend, taken 2 days off from a job I could barely afford to lose, and bought a cake from the bakery downtown because I knew she liked the lemon kind with the buttercream rosettes. I was still wearing my travel clothes. My sister was still in college, living in the house I grew up in, using the bedroom I used to share with her that had somehow become entirely hers the year I moved out. My mother was laughing when she said it. That's the part I still think about sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. Not that she said it, but that she laughed. Like it was just a funny little observation, like I wasn't standing 8 feet away with my hands in soapy water. Nobody corrected her. My aunt raised her wine glass. Someone said, "Oh, that's sweet." My father, sitting at the end of the table, looked down at his phone. I finished washing the dish I was holding, dried my hands, said I was tired from the drive, and I went to sleep in the guest room that used to be my bedroom, on a pull-out cot they'd put there after they converted the space into a craft room. 2 weeks later, I found out they'd cashed out the education savings account they'd started for me when I was 9 years old, the one my grandmother had contributed to for years before she passed. They'd emptied it 18 months earlier to pay for my sister's study abroad program in Florence. They never told me. I only found out because my grandmother's lawyer sent a follow-up letter about the account to my old address, and my mother forwarded it without thinking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store where I worked as an assistant manager, and I read that letter 3 times. Then I drove home, made myself dinner, and didn't call anyone. That was 7 years ago. And it would have stayed buried, the way so many things in that family stayed buried, if my sister's husband hadn't knocked on my apartment door on a Thursday evening last spring and said the 6 words I hadn't prepared myself to hear. "We really need your help, Ren." Before I tell you what he wanted and what I said, drop a comment and tell me, what time is it where you are and what country are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. 7 years is a long time to build a life from scratch with no blueprint and no backup. When I left that guest room for the last time, I had a 2008 Honda with a slow leak in the rear tire, a checking account with $412, and a job offer in a city where I didn't know a single person. I'd applied for the position online at 2 in the morning 3 weeks earlier, half convinced I wouldn't get it. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because I'd spent so long being told that my sister was the one with potential that I'd started to believe it. The job was an assistant manager position at a regional grocery chain in Nashville. Not glamorous. Not what I'd pictured when I was 17 and telling my school counselor I wanted to go into business. But it was mine. I found an apartment I could afford, split the cost of furniture with a coworker named Bet who had just gone through a divorce and needed to have the expense of starting over too. We weren't close in the beginning, we just needed the same things at the same time. The first year was the kind of hard that doesn't make for good stories. It was the kind of hard where you eat rice and canned beans for a week because you miscalculated and you can't ask anyone for help because there's nobody to ask. The kind where you sit in a laundromat at 11 at night because the machines are cheaper after 10, and you're running the numbers in your head the whole time. The kind where you're fine, genuinely fine, and then you're in the cereal aisle at work and someone's kid is sitting in the cart laughing about something and you have to go to the back room for a minute because you don't know why, but you're about to cry. I didn't talk to my family much that first year, a phone call here and there. My mother would ask how I was doing in a way that didn't leave room for an honest answer. My father would get on the line for 2 minutes and tell me to stay warm and then pass the phone back. My sister sent me a photo of herself at some vineyard in Tuscany with a caption that said, "Missing home." I liked it and put my phone in my pocket. What I was building in those years wasn't remarkable by anyone else's measuring stick, but I was building it, which was more than anyone in that family expected from me. By 25, I'd been promoted to store manager. I was overseeing a team of 43 people, managing a budget, handling vendor contracts, and doing it well enough that the regional director started including me in conversations about expansion. I took every training they offered. I applied for a business degree program online and finished it in 3 years while working full-time, studying after closing shifts with a cold cup of coffee and highlighters spread across my kitchen table. By 28, I was a regional operations manager. I had a real apartment, not just affordable but actual, with a couch I'd chosen myself and a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook in. I had a savings account that didn't terrify me to look at. I had a small circle of people who knew me well and showed up without being asked. Bet and I had become real friends by then, the kind where she could tell from the way I answered the phone whether something was wrong. The kind where I knew her coffee order and her mother's middle name, and exactly which topics to avoid when she was already tired. She was the person I called the night my sister's husband showed up at my door, and she was the person sitting on my couch with takeout containers between us, 20 minutes after I'd sent him away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For 7 years, my family existed at a careful distance. Holiday cards, sometimes. A text on my birthday that arrived in the afternoon, never the morning. My sister's wedding invitation, to which I sent a gift and a handwritten note and a politely worded regret, because I wasn't ready to stand in a room full of people who all knew the version of me that my mother had narrated for them, and smile. My mother had told people I was difficult. I knew this because my aunt, her younger sister, who'd always been quietly kind to me, sent me a message once that said, "I hope you know not everyone believes everything they're told." She never explained it. She didn't need to. I didn't spend those 7 years angry, exactly. Anger takes energy, and I was using all of mine. I spent them building something solid enough that no one could take it from me, and slowly, in the quiet of a life that was actually mine, figuring out who I was when nobody was defining me. I was 30 when things changed. It started with an email. The subject line was just my first name. I almost didn't open it. But something made me click, and there it was, in my mother's slightly formal typing style, the kind where she capitalizes things she doesn't need to capitalize and uses semicolons incorrectly. Ren, we need to speak with you. Something has come up with the family. Your sister needs help, and we think you may be in a position to assist. Please call us when you can. It's important. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. When I came back an hour later, I didn't respond. 2 days after that, my father called my cell number. I didn't recognize the new number he was calling from, so I answered, "Ren." His voice was different, smaller. "I know this is out of nowhere." "It is," I said. "We need to talk to you about something. Your sister and her husband. They're in some trouble. Financial trouble. And there's a situation with the house. Our house, your mother's, and mine. We could really use your advice. You work in business now." "I manage grocery store operations, Dad." "Still, you understand money. We just need to talk." I told him I'd think about it. Then I hung up and stared at the wall of my apartment for a long time. I wasn't surprised, exactly. Something in me had known, in the vague way you know things you don't want to look at directly, that whatever had been built on the other end of that family was not stable. My sister had married fast, to someone she'd known for 8 months, and their life on social media looked like a catalog, beautiful and expensive, and somehow always new. My parents had retired early, which I'd only learned secondhand, and my father had made some investments, according to my aunt, that hadn't worked out. But I'd kept my distance. That wasn't my architecture. I hadn't been brought in to help build it. The Thursday my brother-in-law knocked on my door, I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour day. I was still in my work clothes when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps. Too deliberate to be a neighbor. I looked through the peephole and stood very still for a moment. He looked rough. That surprised me. I'd only met him twice, once at their engagement party, which I attended briefly out of some residual obligation, and once when they'd come through Nashville for a concert and my sister had texted asking if we could grab dinner. He'd been smooth then, easy with a joke, the kind of person who makes you feel like the room got warmer when he walked in. Now he looked like someone who hadn't slept correctly in weeks. His jacket was wrinkled. He was holding a folder. I opened the door. Ren. He exhaled when he saw me, like he'd been holding his breath. I know I should have called. I'm sorry. Can I come in? I left him standing in the hallway for a moment while I thought about it. 5 minutes, I said, and you can stay in the doorway. He didn't argue. What he told me, standing in my hallway with the folder getting crumpled in his hands, was this: my sister had co-signed on a loan for a business venture he'd started 18 months ago. The business had failed. The loan had defaulted. My parents had put their house up as collateral when my brother-in-law's credit wasn't sufficient on its own, and now the bank was moving toward foreclosure. My sister was 3 months behind on her own rent. They had a son who was 18 months old. I hadn't known about the pregnancy until I saw a photo my aunt sent me after he was born, and they were running out of options. They needed someone with clean credit and a verifiable income to co-sign a debt consolidation loan. My parents had suggested me. I leaned against the doorframe. My parents suggested me, I said. Yes. They sent you. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. They thought you might be more likely to hear it from me than from them. So they used you to make the ask easier. He didn't answer that. He didn't have to. I thought about my grandmother's savings account. I thought about the letter that arrived to my old address. I thought about the craft room. I thought about the book club and the lemon cake and the phrase "the one God got right." "Does my sister know you're here?" I asked. He hesitated. "She knows I was going to try." "That's not what I asked." He looked at the floor. "She's embarrassed." "She should be," I said. "So should you. And so should they." I took the folder out of his hands, told him I needed a few days, and closed the door. Bet arrived 20 minutes later with Thai food and the expression she gets when she knows something is bad. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. Not just about that night, but about the savings account, about the book club, about Florence, about 7 years of carefully managed distance and what it had cost me to build the life I was standing in. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she set down her fork. "Do you want my honest opinion, or do you want me to just be supportive right now?" "Honest." "They didn't come to you when you were eating gas station food. They came to you when they needed your signature." "I know." "So what do you actually want to do? Not what you think a good person would do. You." It was the right question. It was the question I'd been turning over since I closed the door. What I wanted was not complicated. Exactly. But it wasn't simple either. I didn't want revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. I wasn't going to show up somewhere and make a scene. That's not who I am. But I wanted something real to happen. Not for me, not anymore. I'd already survived it. I wanted my parents to sit in a room and understand, clearly, what they had done. Not in the way where they apologized and moved on. In the way where it was documented. Where there was a record. And I wanted my sister, who had never once said, "In 7 years, I'm sorry you left," or "I'm sorry they took your money," or "I'm sorry I didn't say anything." I wanted her to be in the room when it happened. "I think I need to talk to someone else first," I said. Bet tilted her head. "Who?" I'd found my father's brother on LinkedIn of all places 2 years earlier. I'd never reached out. He'd left the family under similar circumstances about a decade before I was born. Something about money, something about favoritism, something that nobody explained and everybody referenced in careful half-sentences. He'd built a business in Atlanta. He was, by the look of things, doing fine. He picked up on the third ring. "This is a name I wasn't expecting," he said when I told him who it was. "I know, I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. Don't apologize. I've been waiting for you to call for about 5 years. He paused. "Your grandmother told me about you before she died. Said you were the one who didn't fit the mold." I took that as a compliment on her behalf. I had to breathe for a second. "Did you know about the education account?" I asked. "The one Grandma put money into." A long silence. I suspected. I didn't know for certain until now. "They emptied it for my sister." "Of course they did." His voice was tired, not surprised. That's who they are, Ren. It's who they've always been. The image has to be maintained at whatever cost. The question is what you want to do with that information. I told him what they were asking. He was quiet for a moment. Are you considering it? He asked. No, but I want to do this right. Then let me tell you something I learned the hard way. He paused. The only way to have a real conversation with people like that is to have it somewhere they can't control the narrative. Somewhere there's a neutral party who's only interested in facts. The bank meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. I didn't tell my parents I was coming with documentation. I told them I would come and listen, which was true, and that I hadn't made any decisions, which was also true. I'd spent the week before going through everything I'd saved. The forwarded letter, a screenshot of the savings account statement my aunt had sent me years ago, a note I'd found in an old email from my grandmother, in which she mentioned the account by name and by purpose. I also told my sister I was coming. I sent her a message 3 days before. I know this is hard. I'm coming to the meeting. I think it's important that you're there too. Not for them, for yourself. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then, okay, the conference room was small and very beige. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my father in a button-down that was slightly too formal for the setting, my mother in the kind of blazer she wore at church. They looked older, not diminished exactly, but worn. My mother's hair was lighter. My father had lost weight. He probably hadn't meant to. My sister came in 2 minutes after me. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. She sat down next to me, which I hadn't expected, and didn't say anything. Just folded her hands on the table. My mother's eyes moved between us. The loan officer was a man in his 50s who had clearly sat in many rooms like this. He walked through the numbers without embellishment, missed payments, the collateral situation, the timeline. He was professional and slightly weary and treated everyone in the room like an adult, which I appreciated. When he finished, he turned to me. Ms. Harlow, I understand you're being asked to co-sign. That would mean you're legally responsible if the primary borrowers default. Do you have questions before we proceed? I have some context I'd like to share first, I said. My mother stiffened. I put the papers on the table one at a time. The education savings account statement, my grandmother's email, the forwarded letter. When I was 19 years old, I said, keeping my voice level, my parents emptied an education fund that my grandmother had built over many years without telling me. I found out by accident. The money was used for my sister's study abroad program. I looked at my sister when I said it. She was staring at the table. I don't say that to cause harm. I say it because this room is asking me to take on legal financial risk for people who've already made financial decisions about me without my knowledge, and that's information the bank should have. My mother started to speak. My father touched her arm. Is that accurate? The loan officer asked. My father cleared his throat. That was a family decision made at the time with. Is it accurate? I asked. He was quiet. It's accurate, my sister said. Her voice was very small. Everyone looked at her. She didn't look up from the table. I knew about it. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my place. She paused. That was wrong. I've known for a long time that it was wrong. My mother made a sound like she was about to redirect. My sister looked up. Mom, stop. She said it quietly, but she said it. Nobody spoke for a moment. I looked at my parents. My father's jaw was set. My mother had the look she gets when she's recalculating. Not remorseful, not yet, but recalibrating. Checking which angle still had traction. I'm not going to cosign, I said. Not because I want you to lose the house. I don't. But co-signing would mean trusting that you'd manage this debt honestly, and I don't have evidence that that's how this family operates with money that belongs to me. We're your parents, my mother said. You are, and 7 years ago when I was eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week, you didn't call, not once. The first call came when you needed my credit score. I leaned back, so I'm going to let the bank do what the bank does. And I'd like to suggest that the two of you speak with a financial counselor, which I think the bank can help arrange. The loan officer nodded. We do have that resource available. My brother-in-law, who had been sitting at the far end of the table saying nothing, exhaled once. He looked in that moment like a man who understood for the first time what kind of family he had married into. My parents said little after that. My father shook the loan officer's hand stiffly. My mother didn't look at me when she stood. My sister walked out with me. We stood in the parking lot for a moment without talking. I'm sorry, she said finally. I don't think I've ever actually said that. You haven't. I know. She looked like she was going to say more and then didn't, like she was learning how, in real time, to hold a hard thing without either dropping it or making it smaller. You said something in there, I said. That was enough for today. She nodded. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But she stayed until I got in my car, and I think we both knew that something that had been sealed for a very long time had just opened enough to let air in. In the months that followed, my parents sold the house. The market did them a favor they didn't deserve. They made enough from the sale to settle the debt and rent something manageable across town. My mother told people it had been a deliberate downsizing. I heard this from my aunt, who told me with a tone that held both exasperation and fondness for the specific absurdity of it. My father went to a financial counselor. I know because he called me 3 months after the meeting, a different kind of call than before. No ask, just his voice, older and slower, saying he'd been thinking. That he hadn't understood, when I was younger, that the choices they made for my sister were choices they were making against me. That he was sorry. I didn't tell him it was fine, because it wasn't, not entirely. But I told him I heard him, and I meant it. My sister and I started talking. Slowly. She called one Sunday evening and we were on the phone for an hour. She told me things she'd never told anyone, I think, about what it had cost her to be the chosen one, the pressure of it, the way it had made her small in different ways than it had made me small. I didn't tell her that suffering wasn't a competition. I already knew that. I just listened. Her son's name is Elliot. She sent me a video of him figuring out how to stack rings on a post, concentrating so hard his little face was completely serious. I watched it 4 times. I don't know yet what my family will look like in another 7 years. I don't know if the repairs that started in that parking lot will hold. Some things don't hold. Some things get rebuilt into something you didn't expect and couldn't have planned. What I know is this: I spent a long time waiting for someone in that family to notice what they'd done without being forced to see it, to just turn around one day and say, "We got this wrong." It didn't happen that way. It happened in a beige conference room with bank paperwork on the table and a woman who had built her own life laid out in front of them, asking them to look. That's not the version I would have written at 22. But it's the one that happened, and I think more and more that the life you build when no one is helping you is the one you actually trust. Because you know exactly which walls you put up yourself, and you know they'll hold. If you've ever been the one in your family that they didn't bet on, tell me in the comments. What did you build? I want to hear it.